Have you ever downloaded a Sublimation Tumbler design off of Creative Fabrica, Etsy, or Design Bundles, and then you wish you knew how to customize it with a name or other text? Well, that's what I'm going to show you in today's video. Now, I'm going to use Silhouette Studio Business Edition to do this, but you could use whatever design software you like to use. Most of the time of the video will be spent in the software, but I'll also show you how I cut down the design, how I wrap it around the tumbler, and how I tape it. I have a lot of videos on that, so we're just going to breeze through that part. After that, we're going to use the Go to Craft Tumbler Press. We're going to press it on, and hopefully we come up with a really cute tumbler for my sister. One of the main things that I want to show you how to do today is to customize your own tumblers or any other designs that you're working with. The majority of the time when I'm making sublimation tumblers, I'm getting my designs off of Creative Fabrica, once in a while off of Etsy or somewhere else. And of course, designs on those sites aren't typically customized, and so if you want to customize things, here's one way you can do it. So that I can show you the steps from start to finish, I'm going to go ahead and start with downloading this image. So I'll click on download. And on my computer, when I download something, I do get a preview of it. This is it right here, super cute. Let me go ahead and close that. And then I'll open Silhouette Studio software. That's the software that I'm going to use today to customize my tumbler as well as print my tumbler wrap. You can do this in other softwares that you might use, such as Inkscape or Adobe Illustrator. But I am finding after using Silhouette software that it is so easy to use. But again, you can do this in probably any design software that you use. Now let me go ahead and pull up my downloads. I could actually drag this to my desktop or save it to my desktop, but in this case, I don't necessarily want to use it again. For today, I'm just going to drag it onto the working space of Silhouette software. Then I can close this. So the first thing I want to do is I want to see what size it is. And I can see right here that it's 9.3 inches wide by 8.2 inches tall. That's close to what I want, but it's really not exactly what I want. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to unlock the proportions. That way I can change the width independently of the height. And for the tumblers I'm using today, I want 9.4 inches wide. And then I'll tab over and I'm going to change that to 8.1 inches tall. Now I'll go ahead and lock this back. This is really cute by itself, but I want to customize this for my sister. So I'm going to put her name on it. Her name's Deborah. So I'll go right over here to the text tool, click on it, and then I can click anywhere over here and type her name. I'm going to use all caps, and I'm going to use a font that's nice and bold, something that'll show up well on this background. I really like to use script fonts a lot of the time, but today I want something that's just going to be big and bold. So I'm going to click off of it, click back on it, and then I'm going to go up here and I am going to find Copperplate. And you can see it changed it. Now let's go ahead and add some color to this. I'll click right over here on what looks like a little paint palette. And then I want to find a color from inside the design for the name Deborah. To do that, I'll click right here on this little dropper tool. And then I can hover over various colors until I find one I like. Now I want it to be nice and bright, and I think I'll select this one right here. When I click on this, the word Deborah is going to change this color. Okay, now let's go ahead and make this a little larger. Now remember, my proportions are locked. I locked that little padlock, and so I can just drag it, and it's not going to get distorted. Now, one thing I noticed when I first started using Silhouette is when you type something, what it says the proportions aren't really accurate. See how this says it's 1.787 inches tall, but it is measuring all the way up to here and all the way down to here. There's extra space in there. To fix that, to figure out what your size really is, with it selected, go to Object, and make compound path. And now you can see it's really barely over 6 inches wide and barely over 1 inch tall. I'm fine with it being 6 inches wide, but I do want to drag this so that it's about 1.5 inches tall. That's a pretty good size, but look, when I put it on here, it doesn't even show up. Now, eventually, I'm going to turn this so that you read Deborah from the bottom to the top and the word Deborah is sideways. But I need to have an offset so it'll show up. With it still selected, I go right over here to the offset panel, click on that, and then I'm going to click on the word offset. So I'll click on offset, and it just defaults to what my last offset was. That is way too small for the word Deborah. I can make it larger by dragging the slider bar back and forth, or I could use the numbers if I know what number I want. I just want to look at it and select from how it looks. Let's go just a little bit smaller. Actually, let me go back up a little bit. Let's try that. So I'll click apply, and then I want to change that offset to white so that it shows up. So I go back here to this little paint palette and I'll select white. And that's really cute. Now let me show you something. Let me drag this up and show you. See this little red line around it? That would actually not print. That's a cut line. So if I were cutting this out, I wouldn't cut this whole thing out. But if I were cutting the word Deborah out of cardstock or something like that, that is showing you my cut lines. I don't want those to show up as I'm designing. So to get rid of it, I click on Deborah, go up to panels, click on line style, click on the second set of lines here. And then if I click here, that means transparent, that line goes away. All right, let's drag it back down so we see what it looks like. I think I really like that size. That looks good. But I want to do another offset. With the white offset still selected, I'm going to go back over here to the offset panel, click on offset again, and I don't want my black offset nearly that large, so I am going to drag this to the left, and let's see, I think that might look pretty good. Let's click on apply, and then let's turn it black. Now I feel like it should have been a little bit larger, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the delete key. Go back to the offset, click on offset, and then drag this a little bit larger. Let's click apply and turn that black. And I like that just a little bit better. Now this looks pretty good, but there's another part of the design I want to add. On the pink layer of Deborah, I want to put a tiny, tiny little black line. Now I clicked on it. Let's see if that really is it. Okay, I am on the right layer. So I can click back and it goes back to place. One more time, we're going back over to offset. Click on offset, and this time it's going to be really, really small. Let's try 0.025. I'll click apply, go back to that paint palette, and then click on black. And I think that looks really good. I think it just sets it off a little bit more. Let me drag this out of the way. Notice all these extra things inside the white and also the black offset that's actually behind it. I don't want those. So if I can get the white layer out here, let's move it where you can see under it. It's hard to work with if it's on white. So I'm going to move it over here. And I want to get rid of all these extra cutouts. There's a couple ways I can do that. Let me click on Deborah. And if I go right over here to these editing points, I click on that. And anywhere that there's an extra cutout I don't want, if I delete all these editing points, it goes away. So I'll click on an editing point, hit delete on my keyboard, and I'll just keep doing this till all these disappear. Now that's one way. Some people don't like to work with editing points, so let's find another way. I'm going to go right over here to where the shapes are. I'll make a circle, or I'll click on the circle, and then I can make a circle that I think is about the right size. Then I'm going to go up here to the select tool so I can select the circle, And I'll move it over, or I can move the word Deborah over so that the cutouts fall within that circle. Then I need to change the circle to white. So I'll select the circle. Okay, I'm having a hard time selecting just the circle. Move that out of the way. I'll select the circle, and then using the paint palette feature, I'll make it white. All right, let's just drag Deborah back up. 2 of those little cutouts are covered. So I'll select both of those items, go to Object, Modify, and Weld. So either of those ways are acceptable. When you have large areas to get rid of, using something to weld to it, to me, seems easier, but you can do either way. After taking care of the white layer, then I went to the black layer and there was one area to fix. After I did that, I selected every part of Deborah and then I grouped them together. Then I was ready to get this put on my design. Now I want to rotate the word Deborah 90 degrees. So I'm going to go to Object, Rotate, and I'm going to rotate it counterclockwise. I like to read it from the bottom up versus the top down. Then select everything, go to Object, and now we're going to align it both vertically and horizontally. Now that I have my design customized, everything is still selected, I'll go to Object and Group. With sublimation tumblers, you always want to mirror your design. To do that, I'll go to Object, Mirror, and flip horizontally. And then lastly, I want my whole design to fit on the representation of my paper. So I'll go to Object, Rotate, and now I can rotate it either clockwise or counterclockwise. It really doesn't matter as long as it fits on this white paper template. Let's go ahead and print this. I'm going to hit Command P on my keyboard. Now I'm slowing this down and I'm voicing over because something happened here that I just can't explain. Somehow my color went from bright pink in the word Deborah to a lighter pink. I must have accidentally hit the color select tool and then focused it on a different area of my print. That's the only thing I can think of. And then I'll click right here, the word print. I'm going to use my Epson EcoTank 15,000 printer. Now, if you want to use that as a sublimation printer, then when you buy it, before putting the ink in it that came with it, put some sublimation ink in it instead. I use Hippo sublimation ink. Also, I want to change my media quality to high or best. So I'm going to click right here and let's change that to best. Now the print button is right here, so I'll click on that. I've used several different brands of tumblers, but today I'm going to use a Go to Craft tumbler. And I really like this little window in it, especially if you're giving them away as gifts or you're selling them. I love to have this little window. The first thing I always do is I go ahead and clean my tumblers. Now I can tell there's one of the little bottoms inside, so I'm going to take that, set it aside. Once we're done sublimating, we'll put it on the bottom. These tumblers come with a cleaning brush and a straw. All I do is I spray some 90% rubbing alcohol on a paper towel. And then I just give it a nice little clean. Try to find a dry spot, dry it off, and set it aside. Now I want to go ahead and dry my table off because you don't want any of that moisture to get on your sublimation print. I am going to have my sublimation print on a cutting mat, so it wouldn't anyway, but I just like to dry my table off. For me, I find it easiest to cut my images with a rotary tool. You can use a guillotine cutter, you can use scissors, but this is what I use. Now, I have a ton of videos on how to cut these, how to tape them, and so until we get to where we're actually going to sublimate this, I'm going to speed it up and do a little voiceover. When I'm cutting my design down, I just like to make sure that I get all the white off of my design. So usually I cut off just a tiny little piece of the design to make sure that happens. Now in this case, my design was a little too tall, so I took a little bit more off. Now the two sides of the bottom didn't come up equal, so I just snipped off a little bit so you couldn't notice. When I tape my tumblers, I use a lot of tape. It works for me, and so if you're interested in seeing this process, at the end of this video, I'm going to have a link to another video where I explain the whole taping process. Now, I'm not sure why I was trying to show you the gap in the paper because I knew I was going to speed this up and voice over it. There was a little gap, so I used my fingernails to rub that out. I also rolled the tumbler on my cutting mat just to make sure there's no gap between the tumbler and the paper. The last thing that I do to get this ready is I go ahead and put a piece of printer paper around it and tape it up. That's just going to protect my heat press. This tumbler press is an auto press and it is by Craft. It is super easy to use and it has different presets. You can also make a custom setting for yourself. The temperature on this is set to 365 for 50 seconds. I just use the default settings for stainless steel. I want to see where my seam is. It's right here. And I'm going to have that face this side. To start it, you just push this start button here, and you're going to see that close up tight against it. After 50 seconds, this is going to open up. It'll rotate about 180 degrees. It'll press it 50 more seconds, and then we're done. This is so easy to use. It's getting ready to open. Watch this process. It is so cool to watch. Now that it's opening, you're going to see that spin. Once it's spun about half of the way around, it's going to close right back up. I love to watch that process. Now, if you see a little gap in the paper, that's just my copy paper that I put around it. Now, unlike you saw me do, when you're putting tumblers in there, make sure you have a heat-resistant glove on. These are not heat-proof, they are heat-resistant, but they do help. And especially when you're taking it out, because that's going to be extremely hot, make sure you're wearing some hand protection. Now I'm just going to lift this straight out, and then I'm going to set it on a Cricut pressing mat. Let me move this out of the way. I'm going to set it here, and I'm going to let it cool most of the way down. Now I got busy, and I was doing other things, so I let this cool all the way off. When I came back in here, I forgot to turn the record button on. Fortunately, I noticed it after I took this much tape off. I haven't even peeked myself. But it is super, super cute. That is really, really adorable. Now, at this part of the video, I was in shock that that word Deborah was so light. It wasn't until I went back to edit the video that I noticed that when I hit print, somehow it went from a bright pink to a more muted pink. Like I said earlier, somehow I must have accidentally used that dropper tool and selected a part of the image that was less pink. Honestly, I don't know how it happened, but I thought Deborah was a little bit brighter than that. I'm not complaining though. Look at this tumbler. Look at that top seam. Now there is a lot of white and light colors in this tumbler, so it's a very forgiving design. Let's look at the bottom seam. Now you can tell I put my paper up so that it's not going around the curve most of the time. I like that real distinct line. When you have it folded under, sometimes you get those fold marks and you get white in your tumbler. I'd much rather have a little bit of white at the bottom that you don't even notice when it's down on your table. So if I have it here, I don't even notice any white down there. Kind of like your view from there. Now here's the final product. I think Deborah's going to love it. She is a breast cancer survivor. If it's time for your mammogram, make sure you make that appointment, follow through, because early detection could save your life. Thanks so much for joining me, and until my next video, bye-bye.